about homeschool assessments
Mm.
because so many homeschool parents are worried, am I doing enough? And they want to know how they can assess that their children are actually learning
Yeah.
and how they can know that their children are meeting the minimum requirements of the national curriculum, which is what the government requires home educated children to do. And also because we have a long-term goal in mind, we want to make sure that our children are doing enough to be able to, at the end of high school, take final exams and get a recognized form of grade 12. So let's first talk about how homeschool parents can assess on a daily basis that they are doing enough.
Mm. So I think for parents who've always homeschooled and their kids have never been in school, it's not that much of an issue because we see our children telling back stories and drawing pictures about what they're learning and the games that they are playing. But when a child's been in school and a parent is used to getting that end of term report and the end of year, your child has passed, they can move on, it sometimes seems to be a bigger issue. So what we would say to parents is that watch your children, look and see what they are telling you, what they are. Mom, look what I found on YouTube, and do you know about the Grand Canyon? And that's all form of information that they've assimilated, that they own, and that they're now giving back to you. Obviously, we can direct children with their narrations when we've read a story to them, or when they're putting a picture disc on a map for where a story has taken place, and they maybe tell you a little bit about the surrounding area. We've also, most of us, use maths and language programs, and at the end of a chapter, there's always a maths test for the kids that you can see. But generally, the other day when we chatted about the legislation around homeschool assessments, you had such a lovely picture about formal assessments and informal assessments. And I think it's worth sharing that again in this context, because maybe a mom doesn't listen to that other video and they can get a clearer picture of what both of those look like.
Well, the informal assessments is just like you said, looking at your children. So we ask them questions, we discuss things with them, we see what they draw, we read what they've written. We especially listen to things that they tell us that they're interested in or that they've remembered. So those are all the informal assessments. And you as a mom also are seeing your child's handwriting every day. You're seeing their maths assignments every day. You know exactly how they are progressing in every subject. And you don't need a test to tell you that because you see it.
Mm.
Whereas the formal the formal assessments are the more schoolish sort of things that we know from our own school days, where children do an assignment and then you grade that assignment, or they write an essay and you evaluate that essay, or they do a test and then you score the test. So it's those more structured things. And, teachers are meant to do both types. But according to research that I've read, most of them spend most of their time doing the formal assessments because that's what they fill in on a report and report back to parents who aren't with their children every day. So in the home education scenario, it's the complete opposite. Because we do the informal assessment on an ongoing basis, we actually don't really need scores and that report from the teacher because we're there. We know what our children are doing. When homeschoolers do need a formal report, it's usually for those who've chosen to register with the Department of Basic Education, and so they need to send in a report from time to time, or in situations perhaps where one parent needs to report to another parent who doesn't live in the same home, where there's a divorce or separation, or, they're the kind of rare scenarios. But most of us can just do the informal day-to-day assessments and know that our children are making progress. And if you see progress, you're doing enough.
Correct.
You don't have to compare with anybody else.
No.
So that's our benchmark. Are we seeing ongoing progress? Because each child's progress is unique as well. And just a sidetrack, there are also seasons where sometimes they kind of reach a plateau in a certain subject because they need to consolidate what they've learned. And then you'll see the progress start to kind of, go up again. They're learning new skills. So don't be alarmed if you do have that, or you do have slow progress in a season. It's really okay. It's natural.
I remember years back when I read Charlotte Mason's original homeschooling series. In the back of, I think it was Home Education, that volume, she had a whole series of tests for children. She didn't call it that. I mean, no, she wouldn't do that. But it was whatever the children had covered in their history. She had narration questions listed there that you can ask. Tell me all that you know about. Explain the pollination of a flower, you know, those sorts of things. So it's not that we are not looking for any kind of measure. You know, your picture of the progress is what we're looking for. And if you are uncertain as a mom, you know, throw in some of those narration questions every now and again. It will probably give your heart a little lift when you see, oh, okay, that is going in, even if they're lying there playing with Lego while I'm reading or whatever it is. So, okay, so that's why we don't really, well, our benchmark is that we don't really need testing in the homeschool, particularly in the lower grades. And you even mentioned in that the what is required by the Department of Education. Folks, if they have more questions, should probably go back and listen to the recording that we did the other day, where you speak a little bit more about why assessing in a homeschool environment is a bit hit and miss, especially if you aren't doing CAPS. Who's going to assess your child? So let folk go back and listen to that. And let's briefly talk about that transition. You know, when the child gets to about 16, sometimes a little later than that, they start to say, when I leave school, or what I want to study, I want to be, you know, fill in the blank. And we start to think, okay, how are we going to prepare our child for a school leaving certificate? They need to be able to take the test. They need to get into university. And parents tend to focus on that, maybe when the kids are a little bit too young already. But around about 16, how does that transition happen? How's it happened in your world? I'll share a little bit from our perspective.
Well, I think looking at my own children, knowing what happened in your home with your children, and looking at other homeschooling families that I personally know, our children all choose different routes to get that end certificate, whether it's GED or Cambridge or the South African matric. But if you've given your children a rich education in their primary grades and you've covered the basic skills, we all want our kids to do the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic or maths. You've done social studies, you've done science, maths, and the English is good, or your Afrikaans if it's an Afrikaans family. Then you've built those foundational skills that will enable them to tackle whatever they need to tackle from grades 10, 11, and 12. And I've seen that so many homeschool children who've had a lovely education just following whatever curriculum their families chose have been able to seamlessly go into that high school years and apply themselves because they know how to read with comprehension, they can do maths, and generally it's the character, it's having the self-motivation to do the work that's required just to get that piece of paper that is, you know, that's what gets them there. And most of them have got it. So it's not as scary as we all initially think it is. When our children are little, we do worry, are they going to pass matric? Are they going to be able to study further? Am I messing up their opportunities by choosing homeschooling? We all have these thoughts and worries. But with the hindsight that you and I have, and just having watched other homeschooling families go through this process, generally it's not as scary and it's not as big an issue as some people think. Why don't you share what your family has done? Because I love that your family did different things. My children have all chosen the same thing. Yours did 2 different options.
Yeah. So it was just really dependent on what the child wanted to do. So Cambridge is obviously a very direct route into university. One of our children started that at 17 and the other at 14 because they were just totally different kids. And the middle 2 children did GED, which they did in their grade 12 year. I think the thing was parents say, oh, don't we have to train our children how to write a test? Again, if the child's character is in place, they will embrace that as just another stepping stone that they've got to master so that they can get on with their future. So, you know, obviously there's a little bit of nerves around, oh gosh, this is the first test I'm ever writing. But they surprise themselves because their character rises up to meet the challenge, and they walk out and they're saying, gee, that was like such a interesting experience or overwhelming experience. And you know, you can prepare them in that way. But to shove all that beautiful freedom that we have as homeschoolers, particularly, you know, below grade 10, into, well, let's study for a test, let's learn for a test, let's get a skill for a test, we just miss out on the beauty of the freedom that we have in our learning. We always like to say, maybe we can finish on this note, that we want to have discipline in life and freedom in learning. So that's where that comes out to play. If our children have learned to embrace difficulties in life, have done their chores, have worked hard at relationships, have worked hard at improving themselves and upskilling themselves, we can give them great freedom in their education, because ultimately that character that's there will help them stand up and meet the challenge for their last couple of years homeschooling.
Yes. You reminded me of Jeannie Fulbright's quote, which we love to remind ourselves of, that
Yeah.
if the purpose of learning is to score well on a test, then we've missed the real reason for learning. So
Correct.
that's
Yeah.
something to think on.
Yeah, definitely.